Sisters and Other Strangers is a really good episode of The Golden Girls with several moments that I absolutely loved. This is the 21st episode of the 5th season of The Golden Girls. This is directed by Terry Hughes, and as always there will be spoilers from now as I go through the episode and share some thoughts. And it starts off with Blanche saying that her sister's coming. Her sister Charmaine has written a book. She's at a book event. There's going to be a book signing, and she's quite surprised by this. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. Usually I go through things chronologically. I will go through that main narrative chronologically, but I want to talk about Magda first of all, largely because I don't actually have that many thoughts with Magda or about Magda, so I'll just kind of sum that up very quickly. Magda is Stan's cousin. She's played by Marian Mercer, and she ends up staying at the house because she doesn't want to stay with Stan, largely because Stan's charging her for extras, and it's not a pleasant place to stay. So she stays at the house, and she is a communist. She's a proud communist, and it's worth pointing out that she's from Czechoslovakia, and I feel like they could have done a lot more with this. It's definitely padding to the main narrative, and I feel like they could have made this the main focus. Not in this episode, but they could have kept that narrative for a different episode. And I think they could have done a bit more with it because it's obviously a really heavy topic. When they're at the bookstore at one point, Dorothy recommends some books on freedom, basically trying to show Magda that communism isn't necessarily the best way of life. And she ends up going back home with some new thoughts, and I guess they wrapped it up well enough and the character's interesting enough, but I think they could have done so much more, and I think we could have got a lot more comedy out of the character as well. She was a very likeable character and she was quite funny at times, so what we got was good, but I was left wanting more. I felt like we could have got more out of the character, and I feel like it was just too heavy a topic and too big a topic to really make it padding for the main narrative. So it was good, but it could have been better if it had been the main focus. The rest of my thoughts are about the main narrative with Blanche and Charmaine. Charmaine is played by Babcock, and she has written this book, and she gives a copy to Blanche, and she signs the inscription, "To my sister Blanche, you have inspired me more than you will ever know." And that's when I thought, hang on, that book's about Blanche. There's an undertone there. And we find out pretty quickly what it's about. Blanche is trying to read the book, she's not getting into it, and then she says, "If it's a piece of junk, I'll have to tell her." No, Blanche, you don't have to tell her. But actually, it seemed like Blanche was going to delight in telling her. Clearly, they don't have the best relationship. And then, quite quickly after, Blanche realizes that Vixen is about her. Vixen is based on her character. And she reads out this passage and immediately recognizes these elements of her own personality. And it kind of confirmed to me that my earlier suspicion was correct, that the book must be about Blanche, and that's the way in which she inspired her more than she will ever know. And we're then in the bookshop. Love the scenes in the bookshop. They're all there, and Dorothy comments that if her sister ever wrote about her sexual escapades, she'd kill her. And Sophia responds, "You'd kill your sister over a pamphlet?" Absolutely loved it. And still in the bookstore, Rose is about to tell a story about how somebody got lost, and Dorothy said to her, "Is this a story about somebody getting lost?" Rose responds, "Yes." And Dorothy says, "Well, don't tell us, show us." And off Rose goes, and that's the bit where Dorothy recommends some books on freedom to Magda. We then have Blanche storming in, making a scene and shouting about how she can't believe this book is about her and it's just a filthy book, and she storms out, and when everybody in the bookstore hears about this filthy book, they all flock to it and presumably buy all of the copies. We're then back at the house. Dorothy has a very animated story about the time her sister messed up her Mrs. Doolittle doll, and then Rose starts telling the story, but then Dorothy interjects with "accident my foot," and then a couple of sentences later with Rose, Sophia interjects with something about rabies because Dorothy was a biter, and it was really funny. The story itself that Rose was telling was fine, but just the interjections from Dorothy and Sophia I thought were absolutely fantastic. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. Charmaine then comes over. She's looking for Big Daddy's pocket watch, which Blanche has, but she said it should have been hers. It was left to Charmaine in the will. And then they get into an argument about the book, and Charmaine points out that it's about her life. And she signs the same inscription for everybody. I think they could have done something a bit better with that. Instead of saying, well, she just signs the same inscription. So we had this kind of red herring at the beginning leading us in the wrong direction to believe it was about Blanche. They could have done so much more with that by saying that actually Blanche inspired Charmaine to be confident and proud of her sexuality and all of these things that make her like Vixen and therefore like Blanche. They could have made that a really so much more meaningful moment by saying, actually, you did inspire me in ways more than you could understand, but not about the book. So I think that was a significant missed opportunity there. But they bond and they make up and everything's really lovely. And ultimately, it was a nice part of the episode. So I had a lot of fun with it. Definitely a very funny episode. Some really great moments, particularly with Dorothy and Sophia. I thought they were fabulous. As I said, I think the story with Magda could have been a lot bigger. I think they could have done a lot more with it. And she was a funny character. I think they could have got a lot more out of the character as well. It's not bad to pad out the main narrative, but I feel like it was maybe underdone a little bit. But nevertheless, that being said, Sisters and Other Strangers was still a really great episode of The Golden Girls, and ultimately one that I definitely enjoyed.